Welcome to the first chapter of our soil unit. We start off the unit setting up two long-term mini farm projects, planting our mini crops and establishing our mini worm farm. Then we are going to establish the importance of soil, and in particular that it's a precious and relatively scarce resource. But how rare is it? To answer that question, we really need to get into a common problem in science, which is how do we conceptualize the scale of really large quantities? Part of what it means to think about scale, proportion, and quantity is to develop tools for thinking about the very big and the very small. In our unit, we're going to use the tool of the scale model as an analog. If the Earth were the size of an apple, how much soil would there be? The surface of a typical apple turns out to be about 6 inches by 6 inches. We show our students this by taking a piece of paper that size and crumpling it up around the apple, and it basically covers it. With this tool for representing very large scales, we can now visualize the phenomenon that really drives our unit, which is the amount of land available for farming decreases each year, even as our human population and food needs are increasing on the planet. Let's see how we start to explain that. In Lesson 1, we start with a pre-assessment to figure out what do we already know about soil. We then discuss the unit roadmap and see that plants are, of course, a fundamental part of our soil unit, so we start right away planting seeds that we'll use in later investigations. Then the Green Ninja delivers the unit challenge, and we watch a brief video motivating the unit about composting. A short presentation then introduces students to George Washington Carver, who's a pioneer in soil sustainability that we can use as an inspiration throughout this unit. In Lesson 2, students review the pre-assessment from last time and with a partner and then with the whole class. And then student teams construct their mini worm farms and discuss what do worms need to stay alive. A handout with some best practices for taking care of worms and handling them provides some essential answers. And then, with respect for these important living creatures, students then add worms to their farm and observe what happens. They record what they see on the worm farm data sheet that they're going to use throughout the unit. Students are now eco-scientists. We start Lesson 3 with our phenomenon about the amount of farmland. Students use that apple analogy to represent the planet and the relative area with soil good enough for farming. Then we give students the Eco-Trends research worksheet, and they interpret graphs about real-world soil trends, and we'll work on it again tomorrow. In the next lesson, students check their worm farms and record data, and then they finish the research that they began last lesson and summarize their findings. We then relate the real-world findings that we saw about soil to our apple analogy. And for homework, we finish up by telling students that they're going to each go out and collect and label a small soil sample from near their home and bring it in for analysis. That's it for Chapter 1. In Chapter 2, we're going to see what makes the difference between good soil and bad soil.